All right, how are we doing? This is Ask GMBN Tech. You get your questions in the comments underneath. Don't forget to use the hashtag and we'll give you the answers, hopefully. We always get loads of questions, so don't be offended if yours doesn't make it in. Keep on trying. We always try. There's a lot of you to try and please out there, which is really cool. And also the community in the comments is ace. So if I don't answer it, someone down there will. Okay, first question this week is from Keaton R. For the past few rides, I've noticed my rear brake isn't stopping the same as it used to. This is an age-old thing. I can feel some friction, but I've got to apply a lot of front brake for the bike to react. I replaced the pads at the end of last summer and the bike got minimal usage over winter. The hydraulic disc brake pads, hydraulic disc brakes, do you know what could go wrong? Okay, there's a few things at hand here. So, starting with the basis, when you change the pads, there is a chance you didn't get them bedded in correctly. I did make a video about bedding in brake pads as fast as possible. There's going to be a link to it in the description underneath. So if nothing else, you can fact check by checking that one out. Now, ideally, when you're fitting new brake pads, you do want to do it with fresh disc rotors. I know this might sound a bit wasteful to a lot of people, but all the manufacturers will tell you universally the same thing. Fresh rotors and fresh pads is basically guaranteed really good braking performance. Disc brake rotors naturally wear as you use them, okay? So depending on the brand, let's say the Shimano ones are about 1.81 millimeters thick, you should replace them when they get to 1.51. I mean, that's a teeny amount to measure, and it's not something you'll notice immediately when you're riding. But if you ride in especially wet conditions, it is possible to wear those rotors down. But here's the other thing. As you're braking on the disc rotor surfaces, you're kind of polishing those disc rotors. So the longer you use a disc rotor, the less grip and traction you kind of have on there. Combine that with a fresh set of brake pads that don't bed in properly, you've got a recipe for like a glazed braking surface, and it just might not ever mate correctly. Now, the whole point of bedding in your brake pads is to get some of that material to deposit on the actual disc rotor itself, and then it kind of creates a load of friction, and then you're into the sort of realm of really good braking. So a really important thing to get set up correctly. Can't emphasize that enough. Now, if your brake pads are still fairly fresh on there and they're not contaminated, you could still rescue this. So there's two ways of doing this. One is to buy a fresh set of rotors and get those, and obviously that's the most expensive one, but you will still need to prep the pads first. So get some coarse emery paper, wash the pads down, give them a little scrub, make sure you can't get any oil from your hands or fingers or any other area on them. Use a set of rubber gloves, for example. Give the pads a scrape down on the surface to roughen them up, bit of water on them, and then rub the pads together until you start getting sort of a black sort of residue coming off. Give them a quick clean, let them dry completely, then fit them on your bike and basically get that new rotor on the bike and then bed them in from the start. If you want to do this without buying a new rotor, then kind of do the same thing with the rotor. Get it nice and clean, check it for damage and stuff, make sure there is enough braking left on it, and scuff up the braking rotor surface on there. And the idea is then the rough surface combined with those fresh feeling pads, they kind of mate together properly. So hopefully that will help you out. Like I said, watch the video on bedding in pads. I go into a bit more detail, too much detail for this video to show you. The last one, if your brake pads are contaminated, they're really fit for the bin. I'm sure some people in the comments will disagree with me and say, oh no, I've rescued pads. Yes, you can rescue pads, and I have done this before, but because you can't always rescue them, we can't really recommend you do that because it's a safety thing. By all means try, and I've made a video on that as well, and that's going to be in the comments underneath. I've done this many times, but it doesn't always work, so just be prepared for that one, and good luck. Next one's from Dan MTB. Doddy, how do I know when my chain is bad? When you say bad, I guess you mean worn out. And how can I get scratches off my fork? Well, firstly, inspect your chain. If there's any sort of twists in it, it's bad. If there's any, when you look at the roller, if any of those are cracked, that's bad because your chain will fail at some point. And that will happen at a really bad time, like sprinting away from traffic lights or something, and there'll be like a 10-ton bus behind you or whatever. So just be careful. Check that for safety's sake, and get yourself a chain wear indicator tool. I've referenced these in loads of videos. They're dirt cheap to get, and it's going to save you money at some point because when you wear your chain, you actually wear out other parts of your drivetrain. Now, generally, I think it's between 0.5 and 0.75 you want to replace your chain. It does depend on whether your chain is 10 speed, 11 speed, 12 speed. But you buy one of these tools that tells you on the tool and you can measure it. and it's just made out of stamped metal. It's not a pricey bit of kit to buy. Once you've got one, it's going to fit whatever you do in the future. So get one, basically. And the next one, you said, how can I get scratches off my fork? Now, if it's on the stanchions, so let's have a look at this big boy here. If it's on the stanchion, the upper bit where it moves, then you do need to do this. If it's on the lower, which is a slider, you don't need to. So on the stanchion, if it's got any sort of big nick there, you can damage the seals, you can damage the bushes on the underneath, you can attract more crap to go on the inside of the fork. All those things are bad. So if there is like a scratch on the surface here, feel it. If it's just a divot, it's not too bad, but if it's got like a burr around it, you need to get rid of that. So get yourself a very fine metal file and just file the edges of that burr away until it runs smooth and it's not going to catch on your thumb when you rub it around. Obviously be careful, you don't want to cut yourself here, but I use my thumb because you get a real good gauge if anything else is going to catch. And then once you've done that, you could use it, but what I would do is go a step further. Now you can get dedicated kits for this, but I've done this before using nail varnish. Get yourself an extremely hard nail varnish and basically fill in that gap. Basically, and then you might need to sort of just file it very gently just to put it in line with that stanchion tube, but hopefully you've got a make-do repair there. Now there are, like I said, there are some kits available on the market that have like a much hardened version of what I would use nail varnish to do, because the nail varnish isn't a permanent fix, you are patching up something there, but it will get your fork working again. Next up is from Andy Knight. I want to add gears to my dirt jump bike, which is running a Hope single speed Trials rear hub. Specifically, I'm interested in the SRAM GX Access wireless setup to avoid another cable. Adding gears to the bike isn't a problem, it's a Santa Cruz Jackal, but will I be able to remove enough cogs from the cassette to make it fit an undersized body? Okay, so those hubs are really cool. I think you can run 7 speed on those. Up to 7 speed, something like that. So you're not going to be able to run 12, so I'd throw Access out the window at this point because it's not going to suit you, even if you can get it on there. Because Access, you can't screw in the limits on there. It's set. In fact, the limits, you don't even need them on there. It won't shift outside those limits, but it's going to shift those 12 gears. So that's not necessarily the right approach. You could lace up a fresh hub and put Access on there, but then the other problem you'll have is you'll have this 12-speed cassette with a massive range on the back, which you don't need. You'd almost be better off with the road stuff for the SRAM range, because you can have a nice compact cassette and then have a road mech, which could be smaller with a tighter cage on the back there, nice and small, because the SRAM Access mech is a big old thing and it's not really the ideal thing for a dirt jump bike. That said though, I bet money at some point, if it's not already been out there, people like riders like Brandon Semenuk and Brett Reeder will end up using wireless Access stuff, and there will be a sort of a slope style option out there, or downhill friendly, to keep an eye out on that one. Yeah, I'll probably just get like a Saint short cage mech, something like that. Real strong springs on them, and the mech itself is pretty strong. Also, you're not going to cry when you smash your bike up, which you will because it's a jump bike, and that's what happens. If you've got an Access mech on there, well, each to their own. The Hairy Bike Packers. Hi Doddy, I'm building a bike from parts for the first time. It's a carbon hardtail frame with a press fit 30 bottom bracket. Should I use anti-seize, or do I need carbon specific products for installing the bottom bracket? I would use a press fit retaining compound always in this situation, but super important, because the fact it's essentially a form of glue. It is designed specifically for like putting those cups into the carbon frames. You must use the primer. So you have to get 2 products, the primer and the compound. The primer you prime the cup with and you prime the frame with, because if you don't do this, sometimes depending on which frame and cup combination you're bonding into the frame, that's essentially what it is, you can actually damage the carbon when you take that out. You'll get it in fine and it won't be a problem until you go to remove it. If you bash it out, I've heard of like lumps of carbon coming off the inside of the frames. So for whatever's sake, use the primer with it, definitely, and it will be problem free. Happy days. Put loads of the stuff on. It's all good. Comes in a little pot, looks like nail varnish with a giant brush, and then you just literally brush it around. Should be some shots, hopefully, of me doing it on that Yeti. Next up from Justin Koss. I'm going tubeless for the first time. Any do's and don'ts I should know? And anything I need to know to maintain the setup. Okay, don't do it in your front room where you like your carpet, your sofa, your general furnishings, or your quality of life, because if it goes wrong and your partner catches you, or more importantly, if it damages the place, it's just not worth being around, because that stuff is vile when you get it in carpet and sofas and stuff. Trust me, I know about that from the early days, okay? So just don't. If any doubt at all, do it outside. The worst that's going to happen is you're going to get some of the stuff on you. So next step is don't wear any clothes you particularly like, or expect to like wear at the pub and look good in, because it will look like, well, you're just going to have stuff all over you. Not very good. It look like a builder's radio. Okay, next one. Obviously, you want to make sure your tyre is clean and the rim is clean, preferably a fresh set of tyres. So if your tyres are on the way out and you don't want to buy a new set yet, maybe just hold off a bit longer before you convert to tubeless. Wait till they're worn out. The best way to do tubeless is with a fresh set of tyres. Honestly, it will make all the difference because the tyres are completely fresh. They can be the tightest fit when they're new compared to an older tyre, which will very marginally stretch over time. And also, if there's any damage indication, you're not going to have to repair anything because it's a fresh one. So that's the next bit of advice. If you don't have a tubeless pump, now to be honest, I think most rims and tyres are okay. Worst case scenario, you can use a compressor. That will get one going. You can use one of these sort of type things. If you've not got one, one of your friends might. It's essentially a compressor style bottle. So you put the pump into this, you inflate this up to a certain pressure, then you put this on your valve and you release all that pressure into one. It's kind of like using those tubeless pumps out there. You might not need it the first time. I would be willing to have a go first because most manufacturers are kind of wise to it now. It's not a problem like it used to be where you'd literally be pumping for ages and you couldn't get tyres to seat. If you're struggling to get the tyre to seat, use some warm soapy water. Use a brush, like a washing up brush, something like that. Obviously don't ever use it for washing up afterwards. Run the soapy water around the rim, around the sidewall of the tyre and stuff. You can do this when it's on as well, just put it all aside. And as soon as you put any sort of air in there, it helps it just slide into place and the bead goes, well, thereabouts. What else? It's kind of common sense really. In fact, I've got a tubeless 101 style video in the comments underneath. I promise you there will be some things in there that will be helpful for you. Watch it before you do it. Don't watch it whilst you do it, yeah? Get all the things in your head, what you're gonna do, and then you'll nail it. It's easier than you think, you just need to think of a few things first. And the last one, check on your tyre sealant every few months. So this depends on where you ride, the heat you ride in, the tyre sealant you use. For example, if you use the Stan's race fluid, it dries up extremely quickly because it's designed to seal massive holes. So if you don't want to be changing stuff all the time, don't bother using that one. Use a more regular, like an endurance style sealant. In fact, the Stans do the endurance sealant. So it varies. Super hot conditions, it's going to dry out quicker. If you burp your tyres loads, if you ride like Blake where every single turn in the world is 90 degrees and just goes around them, then you're naturally going to burp air out of those. If you rim out on stuff and you damage your rims, you can leak out tyre sealant there. So it's up to you to monitor it. You can do it two ways. You can either take a bit of the tyre off and actually monitor visually on the inside, which technically you should do, or you can do the cheats way, give it a little slosh around. When it stops sloshing, chances are most of it's dried up, and put some fresh sealant in through the valve. Next up is from Josh Putzkammer. If you zip tie your hydraulic brake cable to your frame too tight, could it block the flow? No, don't worry too much, unless you're using like metal circlips or something and you're cranking them up ridiculously. They're designed to handle the hydraulic pressure, so generally you'll be absolutely fine with them. They're quite tough. In that respect to crashing. Bit different, like dropping your bike against a rock or something in a crash. Yes, you can arguably split one then, but not with the cable tie, so don't worry about that. That's all good. Okay, wow, that was a lot of questions. Hopefully I gave you some answers interesting for you. Let us know what you think in the comments underneath. Be nice to everyone, have a good day, and go for a ride, more importantly. See you later.